Assalamualaikum, my name is Firzana Huda binti HAMBALI and I was supervised by Sir EZLAN bin ELIAS. My research is titled Gender Influence on Latent Fingerprint Development using Natural Extract from GAMBIR and CURCUMA. For introduction, fingerprint as individual identification emphasize their distinct statistical probability, which makes them higher reliable for comparison just like DNA. Second, biological details of latent fingerprint primarily composed of water and organic compound, which are secreted by sweat and residues. These specific chemical residues are what the powders must bind to. Powders tested being used are natural and plant-derived pigments from GAMBIR and CURCUMA, which are safe and organic alternative to commercial black powder. Next, significance of my study. Fingerprints was used by centuries ago and as reliable tools for criminal identification in late 19th by these pioneers, which have systemic classification method. Commercial black fingerprint powder is made of charcoal and black carbon, which are highly effective for latent fingerprint development. But its fine particle poses severe health hazards such as lung damage and respiratory irritation in longer time usage. So the first problem statement is, can natural powders be utilized as efficient alternative to black powder in developing latent fingerprint? Second, does gender influence the quality and clarity of fingerprint development by using natural powder and black powder? Thirdly, how does the effectiveness of GAMBIR and CURCUMA with black powder in developing latent fingerprint on non-porous surface? Lastly, are there any observable differences in ridges in minutiae between female and male using GAMBIR, CURCUMA and commercial black powder? So there are two objectives. The first one is to investigate the influence of gender inequality by using GAMBIR and CURCUMA powder in developing latent fingerprint. Second, to compare the alternative powder with commercial black powder in developing latent fingerprint on non-porous surface. So these are the research that support my study. So first, Ma stated that fingerprints are permanent and unique. It gives accurate identification to every individual. Second, Mishra Engine stated that fingerprint composed of tiny complex skin folds such as ridges and minutiae, which are completely formed before the baby is born. Hasibuan stated that GAMBIR leaf shrinks and lost its moisture under hot air, which shows this leaf have low level of moisture among similar leaf. And lastly, Havekova stated that CURCUMA contain natural pigments such as curcumin, which act as excellent dye pigment, eco-friendly in visualizing latent fingerprint. So for methodology, for the sample selection, I carefully assemble a 22 total of individuals, which are 11 male and 11 females. Bear in your mind, consent form was given, which we only wanted their fingerprint, not their other biological evidence such as DNA. Then we selected 3 powders. So the first one is commercial black powder as control, standing against it GAMBIR powder and CURCUMA powder. As the subjects and powders ready, we turn our attention to the 2 selected non-porous surface, which the first one was smooth ceramic tiles and the second one is plastic materials, which are Tupperware. Then to the important part, which is control deposition, where the respondent wash their hands with soap and dry with tissue paper. And for the non-groomed type, the respondents directly paste their finger on the non-porous surface, while for the groomed one, the respondents smear and smudge their finger on the face to collect the oil and residues, then paste on the non-porous surface. Then prints were developed. For image acquisition, camera was fixed at same distance, angle and lighting, and I used cam scanner application to sharpen the contrast, flatten the background and liften the ridges. This will develop visual image. Lastly, for grading, I grade every fingerprint carefully by counting the ridges and plotting the minutiae, which give them ultimate uniqueness. Moving on to the result and data analysis, I use t-test per 2 samples for means. So on your right, you can see example of latent fingerprint that have been developed. So for male gender, the performance between standard powder and gummy powder. The R-square value of standard powder is 0.3895 and for gummy powder 0.0004, which shows flat trend line. And the p-value obtained from the t-test is 0.6726, which is greater than 0.01. This shows this data is not significant. Then, performance between standard powder and curcuma powder. The value of R-square of standard powder is still the same, but for curcuma powder, the R-square value is 0.0232. The p-value is 0.6672, which is also greater than 0.01. That shows this data is not significant. Lastly, direct comparison between gummy powder and curcuma powder, where the p-value of this data is 1, also greater than 0.01. This shows this data is not significant. Moving on to the female gender. Performance between standard powder and gummy powder. The R-square value of standard powder is 0.0093, while for gummy powder is 0.0548. The trend line shows downward trend line. So the p-value of this data is 0.000597, which is smaller than 0.01. This shows this data is significant. Next, performance between standard powder and curcuma powder, where the R-square value of standard powder is still the same, but for curcuma powder, the R-square value is 0.0093. The p-value of this data is 0.0156, which is slightly greater than 0.01, but still the data show not significant result. Lastly, direct comparison between gummy powder and curcuma powder in female, where the p-value of this data is 0.5610, which is greater than 0.01. This shows not significant result. Then direct comparison of gender for standard powder, where the p-value of this data is 0.00759, which is greater than 0.01, which shows not significant. Then for GAMBIR powder, the p-value is 0.8152, which is also greater than 0.01, also shows not significant. Lastly, curcuma powder, the p-value is 0.4611, also greater than 0.01, shows not significant result. So, for the data result that is not significant, so the powder can be used because there's no relationship, while for there's no significant, there are relationship between the powder and the gender. To wrap up this presentation, here's the conclusions and recommendations. So the first conclusion, the study found significant difference in fingerprint quality based on gender using GAMBIR and curcuma. The second one, the study successfully compared between alternative powder and commercial black powders on non-porous surface. For recommendations, if I got the chance to pursue these studies on the future, I would like to expand my sample size to hundreds or thousands. And then, I will choose powders from different manufacturers, especially the imported ones. Thirdly, I will analyze the size of particles and the consistency of the powder by using proper instruments such as SEM. And then, I will control the diet of the respondents for a period of time as there is biological effect. And lastly, I will add some factors to these studies such as age and environmental. So these are the references that I use to refer my studies. Thank you for your attention.